everyone. I want to welcome you to yet another session of Suta in the City, coming to you live from New York City. It's so good to see you all tonight. And we have an interesting sutta, the title of 15. 15 what? 15 what, Stephen?
I don't know. I thought that was just a number.
I guess so. I guess so. Sutta
It's a
15.
romantic. It's a romantic title.
It is
Number
romantic.
15.
Yep, I love it.
Issues,
Well, we all have some of those, don't we?
or as some British people like to say, issue.
Well, how about Stephen? You issue forth with a bit of the Nizwiki.
Ms. Zwicky. Yes. Let me share my screen.
Please do.
Okay. Hold on. So, this is from a book that she wrote a while back called Wittgenstein Elegies. And as I mentioned a little while ago, she is a philosopher as well as a poet and a musician. And you might know that Ludwig Wittgenstein, who lived in the first half of the 20th century, is considered one of the most significant philosophers of all time, perhaps. Although I sometimes wonder if his star has waned a little bit. But he was a very interesting person. He was a real sort of larger than life figure, not just an academic. He served in two world wars. He was interred in prison camps. He was fabulously wealthy, born into one of the wealthiest families of Austria ever. And he famously gave away all his money because he thought it was a bad thing. And one of the most famous things that he spoke about was that he thought that things could either be either said or shown. But most things could really only be shown, not said, which is an interesting idea. In other words, some things were sort of beyond the realm of language. And what's another interesting story about him is that uh, when he started getting well known as a philosopher, a group of Viennese men, I'm sorry, it was men only, got together to form a circle to discuss his work. And he got wind of it and wasn't so thrilled about it. And they invited him to come, and he reluctantly showed up. And what he did was he came and he sat with his back to them facing the wall and read poetry. And they were sort of stunned because they were ready for this very intense intellectual discussion about logic and meaning. And he just wanted to read poetry. And so I think poetry was very dear to him. And of course, it's very dear to Jan Zwicky. And this is sort of a set of poems that she put together, sort of imagining Wittgenstein talking. But of course, it's her poetry. And I just love the language in this poetry. It's so beautiful. And I wanted to point out this interesting word limb, limbs, which means to, I think in a basic sense, to illuminate or to point out. And look how beautiful she has losses, limbs, leaves, the long shadowed light. And so this very soft L sound is alliteration, and it's just lovely. So I'll read this poem. It's evening when one hears most clearly. Losses drop like pebbles in a shallow well. A steady hand in the long shadowed light limns even the most delicate of ripples, leaves each thing as it is. Yet still the sickness, clumsy need to wrestle with the pattern, make one blueprint to explain all bricks. But wholeness is a gift of art, its essence transcendental. The most that we can hope is steadiness of soul, courage to render with exactness what is set before us, love what must, each time we grasp it, vanish. And I love this parenthetical second to last line. Each time we grasp it, love what must vanish each time we grasp it.
I
And
love
so
that.
it's just a beautiful poem about this need we all feel to make sense of it all, make one blueprint. But wholeness is a gift of art. It's not something really that we can do for ourselves. And so I think this poem really speaks to me.
Thank you, Stephen. That was really, really so beautiful. I love reaching out. And when we reach to grasp what it is, it has to vanish. It's right up there with impermanence. There,
Yes, we can't just think that we're going to put something in front of us and it will stay there and we can talk about it forever. It's constantly changing and it's very transient.
mm-hmm. Well, how about we move on to 15,
Ah, 15.
a less poetic title, but with a message very important. Well, it looks like tonight that we will need 4 readers. So for those of you who haven't read recently, we would love to see your hands up. Please raise your hands, mendicants, so that we can see you read, hear you read. All right. Todd, and while Todd's reading, someone gather up the courage to raise your hand because we'd love to hear you. All right. Thank you, Todd, for starting us off.
Sure. Mendicants in a disciplinary issue, if neither the offending mendicant nor the accusing mendicant carefully checks themselves, you can expect that issue will lead to lasting acrimony and enmity, and the mendicants won't live comfortably. But in a disciplinary issue, if both the offending mendicant and the accusing mendicant carefully check themselves, you can expect that issue won't lead to lasting acrimony and enmity, and the mendicants will live comfortably.
Thank you so much, Todd. Beautifully done. Next up, we have Jean.
And how mendicants does an offending mendicant carefully check themselves? An offending mendicant reflects, I have committed a certain unskillful offense with the body. That mendicant saw me do this. If I hadn't committed that offense, they wouldn't have seen me. But since I did commit that offense, they did see me. When they saw me, they were upset and they voiced their unhappiness to me. Then I also got upset. So I told others. So the mistake is mine alone, like someone who owes customs duty on their goods. That's how mendicants, an offending mendicant, carefully checks themselves.
Beautifully done, Jean.
I went too far.
No. That was perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. We need another volunteer, which of course, if we don't have one on tap, that means I have to call on someone. And I love to call on Ayavimala. And we are on the 3rd paragraph. Beginning right here. Okay, while
I'm sorry, it just
that's
keeps
okay.
going back to mute. And okay. And how mendicants does an accusing mendicant carefully check themselves? An accusing mendicant reflects, this mendicant has committed a certain unskillful offense with the body. I saw them do that. If they hadn't committed that offense, I wouldn't have seen them. But since they did commit that offense, I did see them. When I saw them, I was upset and I voiced my unhappiness to them. Then they also got upset, so they told others. So the mistake is mine alone, like someone who owes customs duty on their goods. That's how mendicants, an accusing mendicant, carefully checks themselves.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So how about, I'm going to try for Terry in Thailand. Terry, would you like to read the final paragraph for us tonight? Okay, that's fine. What about Lily Tan? Okay, then Sarah, how about Sarah? Would you read the final paragraph for us, Sarah?
I will, sorry.
No worries.
It sometimes gets noisy here, but I'll try to read through it.
Okay.
Let's see, we're in a disciplinary issue.
Mhm.
Okay. In a disciplinary issue, if neither the offending mendicant nor the accusing mendicant carefully checks themselves, you can expect that issue will lead to lasting acrimony and enmity, and the mendicants won't live comfortably. But in a disciplinary issue, if both the offending mendicant and the accusing mendicant carefully checks themselves, you can expect that issue won't lead to lasting acrimony and enmity, and the mendicants will live comfortably.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was great. And thank you to all of our readers. Well, you know, this sutta in 4 brief paragraphs, I don't know about you guys, but there are so many times where I've experienced so much suffering because I wasn't able to properly convey to an individual my displeasure in something that they did and said. So holding off and saying, I won't say anything until finally, when I can't take it anymore, boom, it kind of just explodes. And then I end up saying something, but not in the best way. So here's a situation where there's a lot going on. We have anger, we have resentment, and we have the importance of right speech and even compassion. All of these things balled up into one. And I want to point out something that I found just truly wonderful. Who knew before reading this sutta that even in ancient India, there were customs duty on goods? There was no duty-free stores in the airport.
Yeah. How did they buy their perfume? I don't know.
It's amazing to me. It's amazing.
But this is maybe the sutta which originated the famous phrase, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
With a Z snap, honey. You got that right. You got that right.
So now we know when people say that, they're talking about famous number 15, I guess.
Check yourself. Check yourself
before you wreck yourself and your whole community.
That's right. That's right. So here we have in this first example, there's an issue, right? We have this issue. And if it's not handled properly, there will be great discomfort, sort of like roommates who don't live well together. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. And so what do we see happening here? We have this offending mendicant who's done something wrong with the body. Maybe he was eating after the proper time and someone saw him, right? Maybe someone saw him and they got upset and they told him, hey, you know, I saw you eating at 3 o'clock. This was after the main meal time. And me not taking well to it, I told everyone else, you know, so-and-so said this to me. Can you believe that they said this to me? That's so rude. What do you think about that? And then what happens, Stephen?
Well, then everyone seems to get upset. I mean, it seems to be saying to me, what do you think? That it says we basically have to own our actions and not just try to pretend that our actions don't have consequences, right?
Hmm.
That we are heir to our actions. Whatever happens because of them are part of our situation. We can't just pretend that's not the case.
Right.
So to do something and think that we're just going to, quote, get away with it is just sort of the wrong approach.
So here we have a mendicant who saw something that upset them. You wouldn't have seen them if they didn't do it. I was upset, and I voiced my unhappiness, and they got upset. Now, why does he say here, the mistake is mine alone?
Well, what do you think? I think it's because the way that the displeasure or the disagreement was voiced was done, it was done in an unskillful way, causing further harm to that person. And so there must be a way to register one's discontent without making that person feel even worse. It's a
It,
lack of compassion.
it's a lack of compassion, and it's not an easy thing. And I know that I continually refer to current era, where at least in the States, there seems to be what I witness as a great deal of lack of compassion, and instead a driving desire to correct others, or as they say, virtue signal, to call people out. You did this, you're bad, I condemn you, and I'm morally superior. So this is very antithetical to the Buddhist teachings. And again, I know that I often speak to social media, but this is a phenomenon that we see often in social media, right? Taking pictures of people without masks, putting them up on Facebook, and saying something, can you believe these people, how horrible they are? Um,
It does not lead to communal harmony.
mhm, mhm.
It,
So there's several things that we have to look at when we're in a situation where we see something or hear something that's upsetting to us. Number one, this is upsetting. Um, is it upsetting because the behavior is wrong? Or is it upsetting because something in me, and therefore I have to check myself before I wreck myself? For example, there are times when people engage. I used to get upset when people would speak loudly on the Metro North or the Long Island Railroad. Now, is that an issue of me, or should people be quiet when they're taking mass transit? I would say that it's an issue that I have to deal with, and to ask people to speak quietly on the train, at least in this country, is kind of a recipe for not a good trip, right? So first we have to look, is it reasonable? Are they truly in the wrong, or is it something that I need to tolerate? If the other person is in the wrong, do we need then and there to say something? Well,
and
there's
can
the,
we say, sorry, I was
go
just going
ahead.
to say, and can we say something in a skillful way that doesn't make them really upset?
Right. That's the next thing. Do we need to say, does it need to be said? And if something needs to be said, can it be said with the motivation of loving kindness, with the motivation of compassion? And I would argue that if that's not possible, then we should really try to refrain from saying something, because then this would issue harm to others and to ourselves. Does that seem reasonable to you, Stephen?
Absolutely. We have to always check our motivations for whatever actions, but particularly maybe dangerous ones like condemnation. What's motivating this condemnation? Is it anger? Is it hatred? Is it irritation? Well, then that's really on me, these negative feelings.
Right. And then after we decide that we can speak to the person and offer suggestions with loving kindness for their own good, If it is not taken well, what will our response be? Are we going to get angry? Will we upbraid them for how poorly they receive our suggestions? I think it's really an important thing to say, because these are situations that can easily escalate. So if we can answer yes to all of them, yes, this is inappropriate on their part, yes, it's harmful, yes, I should offer correction, I can do it with the motivation of loving kindness. And then if they don't take it well, can I receive their anger well? And I think if we can answer yes to all of those, then we have thoroughly checked ourselves. We have not wrecked ourselves. And we're ready to make that. On the other hand, doing this and saying, yes, I'm going to be the corrector of someone's wrongdoings, if we're going to take this approach in life and offer our assistance to others, it is paramount that we also allow others to correct us. Therein lies the rub. Am I not wrong, Stephen?
Absolutely right, Regina. Thank you for your correction.
We must be able to take correction. And it's not easy. It's one of the hardest things. I mean, we've seen this in many suttas before. And one of the suttas we studied, I'm not quite sure. I know in the Metta Sutta, what is said in the Metta Sutta about being able to sutta, about being correctable, Stephen?
It's a good thing. It's a recommendable quality. Easily spoken to, easily correctable. Right. Last thing you want in a monastic community or any community is somebody who says, I didn't do that. Who do you think you're talking to? I'm perfect. Not working well.
Right. So, yes, being easily corrected. When someone corrects us or offers us correction, even if it's a stranger, this is what I said the last time, taking people in our lives, whether they're family, friends, or people who just are in the checkout line at the store, seeing people with the assumption of benevolence. If we can give them that, if we can see that they are a benevolent force, we are less likely to lash out. And if someone corrects us and we don't need correcting and we think it's an idiotic thing, well, do we have to lash out, or can we just say thank you for that?
Are you talking to me?
I have to give.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, not everyone might get that reference. Taxi driver. I'll give an example. You know, people. I don't know. This may be a United States thing, but I was in a line at a drugstore a few years ago, and there was a guy who I think was in the line, but I couldn't tell because he was way off the line. So I wasn't sure if I was able to move ahead or if I was supposed to be behind him. So I just kindly asked, "Oh, are you in line?" And that wasn't taken well by this gentleman. Well, he started to lash out. What does it look like? Does it look like I'm in line? Well, would I be if I'm not in line? I'm in line here. But it didn't stop there. It continued and continued and continued. And so what was my responsibility? Was my responsibility to tell him how unreasonable he was? Or to just take that, observe it, and he was sort of correcting me, but in an unkind way. And just, oh, thank you, you're in line. And then let that be. It's not easy to do. It's never easy to meet anger with non-anger. Because we are primed, the animal instinct is to see anger as a threat and to attack back. But what would the Buddha say to this? That's a no can do.
Check yourself.
Before you wreck yourself and your
Yep.
karma. And I think this is a fairly easy sutta to understand on its surface, but very difficult to enact in real life. But again, this is why we read these suttas over and over again with each other and discuss them so that we can integrate these thoughts into our minds and then enact them in our lives. So with this, I would like to ask if there are any questions out there. regarding this sutta? And if not, we can always move on to the next. But I do see a question. I think it's Suanne. So yes, Suanne. A question regarding the sutta? You'd have to unmute yourself. And
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry, should I speak?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can't because I have this voice telling me you're unmuted. The host would like you to do this or that, so sometimes I can't hear you over the recording. Anyway, I would just like to say comment on my ongoing saga where I had the breakthrough last week with my cousin on Facebook. This Sutta is just following me right along with all the progression through this story. So I had the breakthrough that I actually, under the anger, was that I was brokenhearted and in pain. So now I'm up to exactly this point. I have not written her back because I want to tell her that I'm brokenhearted, but at the same time, I wanted to say, I don't need the woke police. I am woke, and I don't need you to pull a cancel culture on me. I was really shocked that that was your reaction, but I'm not going to say that. And now I feel when I just read this, is it instructing us to whether or not we think we're wrong or right? It is always skillful to give the other person the benefit and tell them, as you said about that guy in the store, thank you for pointing that out, and I'm sorry that I upset you, or whatever, and not go into how I was offended that our relationship was that fragile, that I could be canceled out and just because I made a faux pas on Facebook. Do you understand what I'm asking? I'm thinking.
Yes.
I want to make it as succinct as possible, but I want to be authentic. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
And if I think when I respond to anyone via email, less is always more. And actually, if you want to talk more about this, we can talk sometime after class, and I can help guide you through that. I know it's been a difficult thing, but I'm certain everyone's very glad to hear how these suttas are following you through your experience in real life, and that's great. And again, I have found in my experience that when I am a bit condemnatory towards others, it just doesn't work well. It's not good for my life, and it's not good for them. It just creates conflict. And I see Jean has her hand up. Jean?
Oh, yeah, I just had a little experience of this week, and I was the offender. I was in the hallway going downstairs, and I noticed someone. I was with two other people for a moment, and then I left to go down. I had to go to the pharmacy downstairs, and it's also the medical center. So I noticed this woman who had like a one of these wheelie things to hold her up, and and I let her pass by. But on the way, then I followed a little bit later, and she was at the elevator, and the elevator came, and I took the stairs. And even though I'm kind of slow and rickety, I still got down before she did in the elevator. So I figured, I don't know where she's going. And I just went ahead and I went through the doors. And then I went in the pharmacy. And when I got out, she was standing there waiting. And I thought, oh my goodness. So I said to her, oh, and then I recognized who it was. I said, oh, Berta, I see I dashed ahead of you, dashed. But anyway, and so it left you waiting here, and I I said, I'm sorry, and she said, yes, I noticed. And then I said, will you please forgive me? And she nodded, and that was the end of it. And I mean, she didn't smile or anything. It was like, she's a wise old lady, even older than I am. And, I realized she was aware what I did. And that was it. That was enough, And so I thought, I really feel like telling other people how wonderful that was in a way for me, to be aware of my own mistake. That so often I would try to, it would embarrass me, but I wouldn't have the ability just to so quickly take responsibility. And also the way she responded, I thought was so fitting for who she was, and I appreciated it. But anyway, I thought it was a good experience and just related.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think it's, for so many people, it's so hard to admit when we've done something unmeritorious, if you will. But I think the ability to admit it and acknowledge it and take responsibility, it's good for us, it's good for our self-esteem, it's good for our karma, and it's good for the other person as well. And no matter how they take it, certainly many of us have offered apologies and the other person hasn't been necessarily gracious in the acceptance of that apology, but still to know that we did the right thing for ourselves and for our karma. And so thank you so much for sharing that, Jean. Thank you. I see that Terry has their hand up. Terry. Utan Patak. And if you could just unmute yourself, Terry.
Hello.
Hi.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you when you request the reading. It's just that I got the new desktop and I haven't got microphone hooked up and everything is not quite ready.
No worries.
So I'll do the reading next time when I'm be more ready.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And did you have a question or?
No, not this time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Terry. I think with that, we have enough time to begin the next sutta, which would be a good thing to do. So let me share my screen. Let me first call that sutta up, and then I will share so that we can begin at least speaking of right speech, so that we can share again, or so that we can begin reading. Matter of fact, Terry, if you're able to read now, that would be great. Topics of discussion. And if not, we can call on someone else.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Is it echoing now? Because I'm looking at my desktop, but I'm speaking through my cell phone right now.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. All right. There are medicants, these three topics of discussion. What three? You might discuss the past. That is how it was in the past. You might discuss the future. That is how it will be in the future. Or you might discuss the present. That is how it is at present. You can know whether or not a person is a competent or hold a discussion by seeing how they take part in a discussion. When a person is asked a question, if it needs to be answered with a generalization, and they don't answer it generally, or if it needs an analysis and they answer without analyzing it, or if it needs a counter question and they answer without a counter question, or if it should be set aside and they don't set it aside, then that person is not a competent to hold a discussion. Then a question is asked when a person is asked a question, if it needs to be answered with a generalization and then answer it with generally, or if it needs analysis and they answer after analyzing it, or if it needs a counter question and they answer it and they answer with a counter question, or if it should be set aside and they set it aside, then that person is a competent to hold a discussion.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you so much. So those of you who are starting on this new sutta, I wonder how often we may have thought when we're beginning a conversation, well, is this person even competent to have a discussion with? I think it's an important question. And I'm wondering if, okay, Susan. Susan is our next reader, beginning right here. You can know.
Okay, let me enlarge the font. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
You can know whether or not a person is competent to hold a discussion by seeing how they take part in the discussion. When a person is asked a question, if they are not consistent about what their position is and what it isn't, about what they propose, is that the word propose? Am I saying it right?
You are.
Yeah, can't trust my eyes. About speaking from what they know and about the appropriate procedure, then that person is not competent to hold a discussion. When a person is asked a question, if they are consistent about what their position is and what it isn't, about what their purpose, about speaking from what they know, and about the appropriate procedure, then that person is competent to hold a discussion. You can know whether or not a person is competent to hold a discussion by seeing how they can take part in the discussion. When a person is asked a question, if they dodge the issue, distract the discussion with irrelevant points, or display annoyance, hate, and bitterness, then that person is not competent to hold a discussion. When a person is asked a question, if they don't dodge the issue, distract the discussion with irrelevant points, or display annoyance, hate, and bitterness, then that person is competent to hold a discussion. Would you like me to go on? If you know whether,
Wait,
would you like me to go on?
I think that might be a good place to stop there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was struggling a bit.
No, you did great. Thank you so much. So you can see where we're going here. Matter of fact, maybe let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Wondering if we should go up. No, let's just stop here. So I think we have some very key points here. Is there something that you wanted to bring out so far, Stephen, regarding this? I think it's very important, especially here in the States, where we've recently had an election. Well, I don't know what this would say for many of our politicians when they're asked a question, and if they answer with a generalization and they don't answer it, or how many politicians are asked a question requiring analysis and don't, or how many just kind of change the subject. So what are we to do with something like this, Stephen?
Well, I'm not sure that this sutta is really speaking to people who do public speaking. To me, at least, it seems at least primarily to talk about conversations on a personal level. And I think it might be at first seem it might at first seem a little bit antisocial because we might just think, you're not competent, I'm not talking to you. But I think for me to draw out the idea that we need to be willing to sort of step away from a conversation because it's just not helpful, which I think is hard to do.
I think for myself, as someone who has gone through, I'll stop the share there for just a second, as we're heading towards the end. You know, it's definitely not spoken by the Buddha for prime time politicians, but I still think it can be applied. And for myself, when I have found myself reading or listening to the radio or watching the news and a person does not answer the question, instead of getting frustrated and angry, which would be a natural response, it is incumbent upon me to turn that off and to walk away, just the same as I would with an individual. So few people nowadays are able to take part in discussions. You know, I even have friends who, if I talk about something like, well, let's just say pet care. I won't even bring up climate change, but let's say pet care. And there's, you know, if you ask a question and they, well, they say, you know, maybe you shouldn't have a pet. Maybe you're not good at caring for a pet, you know? And so instead of answering the question, what is the best pet food I should get there, instead that there's like a judgment, then for me to say, well, actually, no, I think I'd be a really good, you know, pet parent, that could get me into trouble, because what's happening is not a conversation, but there's a different type of ulterior motive going on. And I think that sort of relates to what you're saying, Stephen.
I think it's a good point. I mean, I think at least part of what this sutta is asking us to do is to, as you just said, sort of understand the motivation behind our conversationalist, our interlocutor. And if it doesn't seem beneficial for us to go there, to engage with it, we are being told that we basically should not. And I think that might go counter to what we might think, which is that we should always just be patient and do our best to talk to this person. But I'm not so sure that's what it says. But it's kind of a complicated issue. Maybe we'll have to finish the sutta first.
I think it's a very complicated issue. And I think that we should leave it there. And I would, you know, if you get a chance to read the rest of it, it's kind of unfortunate to begin a sutta and end it right, you know, right at the beginning like that. But there's
it's a sutta cliffhanger.
It is a sutta cliffhanger. And so we're going to have to like stop at the edge of the cliff. But gang, the good news is that we are going to pick up right where we left off. And that will be Thursday. That will be Thursday Eastern Standard Time. And we will pick up where we left off and discuss this most interesting and important sutta. And I want to thank you all for being here. I hope you got, you know, something out of this that will help you in your lives. And if there's one takeaway that I can give you all, minimize irritations. Minimize things that upset you, even if it's the tiniest thing like a mosquito bite. If you see it, the same thing upsetting you over and over again, see what you can do to fix it, because the less opportunity we have for irritations to enter our lives, the more we can enter in peace, happiness, and joy, which I want you all to have. That is our Buddhist path. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we very much look forward to seeing you Thursday. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheers to everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.